The Arizona summer heat clung to the skin like a living creature, persistently. Melissa Williams felt a small movement in her abdomen as she gazed out the window of her air-conditioned office. "Good morning, little one," she smiled, gently stroking her belly. 6 months pregnant, her body had already changed significantly. On her desk at the accounting firm lay work documents alongside the latest ultrasound image. Her first child with her husband Greg. She remembered how they both cried when they saw the tiny limbs moving. Every night, Greg would place his hand on Melissa's belly and talk to their unborn child. "Melissa, how's the paperwork for the Lyman family coming along?" her boss Michael called out. "I'm just doing the final check. It should be done in about 30 minutes. As she returned to work, she thought about dinner with her parents that evening. It wasn't just a family gathering, for her, it was a small ordeal. Robert and Charlotte Johnson. The real estate tycoons known to everyone in the Phoenix suburbs, and the stars of the social scene. And her parents. From the outside, they appeared to be the picture of a perfect family. But beneath the paint were hidden complex hues. Lately, things had become even more complicated since her sister Vanessa had divorced and moved back home. Vanessa had always been the favorite child, living a life contrary to Melissa's. While Melissa studied accounting diligently in college and built her career, Vanessa dropped out of art school and enjoyed a glamorous life at parties of the wealthy. Her marriage to the heir of a real estate company had been extravagant but ended after just 2 years. "That girl is too emotional. She has talent but is always misunderstood by others," Charlotte would often say. And each time, Melissa would just listen silently. Melissa's cell phone rang, with a mother displayed on the screen. "Melissa, dinner tonight has been changed to 7 o'clock. Vanessa's yoga class is running late. But Mom, Greg and I both adjusted our work schedules for 6 o'clock. You've always been flexible. And isn't Greg busy with work as usual anyway?" Melissa took a deep breath. "Fine, we'll come at 7. I'll try to let Greg know." After hanging up, she leaned back in her chair, exhausted. It was always like this. Melissa was always expected to be the irresponsible eldest daughter, while Vanessa's whims dictated family decisions. In the evening, Melissa parked her car in front of the Johnson mansion. Greg couldn't cancel his meeting with an important client after all. "I'm sorry, honey. But today I'll be strong enough for both of us," she said, as if speaking to the baby in her belly. As she opened the door, Vanessa's lively laughter could already be heard from inside. Entering the living room, she saw Vanessa lounging on the sofa, legs outstretched, laughing about something with their father. "Oh, Melissa. You've finally made it." Her mother Charlotte approached with a wine glass. "My, you've really filled out, haven't you?" Melissa could barely manage a smile. "That's because I'm pregnant, Mom." "Melissa, did you buy that outfit at a maternity store?" Vanessa asked with a grimace. "There are much more stylish options available. I chose it for functionality. I can wear it to the office too." "Well, I suppose. But appearance matters too," her mother interjected. "Robert, bring Melissa something to drink." Her father Robert stood up and headed to the bar counter. Even at 65, his dignified presence was characteristic of the man who had intimidated counterparts in countless real estate deals. "So, Melissa, busy at work?" her father asked, handing her a non-alcoholic drink. "Yes, it's quarterly closing time." "Always work, work, work with you," Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Once the baby's born, you won't be able to work so much." "Is that something you're worried about, Vanessa?" Melissa quietly asked. For a moment, the air seemed to freeze, but her mother quickly changed the subject. "Hey, why don't we have a picnic near the Grand Canyon this weekend? The weather should be nice, and it would be a good change of pace for Melissa." "That sounds wonderful." Vanessa leaned forward excitedly. "I bought a new drone. We can take amazing scenic photos." "Greg has to work this weekend." Melissa began, but her father interrupted. "Greg is always working. You should tell him to value family time a bit more." Melissa wanted to object, but the dinner bell rang, interrupting the conversation. During the meal, they discussed baby names and nursery preparations. On the surface, it was a pleasant family dinner, but Melissa felt Vanessa's gaze on her several times. "Melissa, I'm thinking of having the Grand Canyon picnic on Saturday. Would that work for you?" her mother brought up again. Though she wanted to refuse, faced with her parents' expectant faces and Vanessa's challenging eyes, Melissa nodded as usual. "Yes, that's fine. I'll join you." As she was leaving, Vanessa stared at Melissa's belly and said, "With the baby, our parents' attention is all on you now, isn't it?" "Vanessa, this isn't a competition. Isn't it?" Vanessa smiled eerily. Saturday morning, Melissa woke up with mixed feelings. Greg had already left, leaving a note by her pillow, "I'll come pick you up if work finishes early. Take care. Love you." She clutched the note to her chest and took a deep breath. "It's going to be okay," Melissa said as if talking to her baby. "Just a family trip. It'll be over soon." An hour before the scheduled time, Robert's luxury SUV stopped in front of her apartment. From the driver's seat, her father waved, and Vanessa waved from the back seat. Her mother Charlotte got out of the passenger seat and embraced Melissa. "Today's going to be a lovely day," Charlotte smiled, but her eyes seemed to be thinking of something else. In the car, Vanessa chatted enthusiastically about her new designer sunglasses and drone. Melissa directed her gaze out the window, watching the Arizona wilderness unfold. As they moved away from the city, the landscape gradually became drier, with browns and reds becoming the dominant colors. "Dad, where are we going?" Melissa asked. "We're still far from the Grand Canyon, right?" "Yes, but there's a spot along the way with amazing views," Robert smiled through the rearview mirror. "A secret place I heard about from a tour guide friend." "Huh, I didn't know about that." Melissa began to feel uneasy. "Big sister has no sense of adventure," Vanessa sighed. "Always needs everything according to plan." "I'm pregnant, Vanessa," Melissa quietly retorted. "Some concern is natural." The car left the paved road and turned onto a gravel path. Red Rock Mountains dotted the surroundings, with dry shrubs scattered about. It was a deserted place with no tourists in sight. "Are you sure this is right?" Melissa couldn't hide her concern. "You worry too much," her mother said. "Robert knows the way." After driving about 20 minutes more, the car suddenly stopped. There was nothing around, just the vast desert landscape. "Here we are," Robert announced excitedly. "The view from here is spectacular." Everyone got out of the car, and Melissa felt the strong sunlight. The June Arizona sun was beating down mercilessly. She pulled her hat down and reapplied sunscreen. "Look, if we climb that hill over there, we'll have an even more wonderful view," Charlotte pointed to a distant hill. It was at least 500 meters away. "We're walking that far?" Melissa was surprised. "I'm a bit tired, and in this heat." "Here we go again," Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Always complaining. A little walking won't hurt the baby." Melissa was about to respond but swallowed her words when she saw her parents' expectant eyes. "Fine. But I'm taking water with me," she pulled out a bottle. The group began walking. Melissa moved at a slow pace, occasionally stopping to rest. Her parents and Vanessa went ahead, seemingly whispering about something among themselves. When they reached the middle of the hill, Robert suddenly stopped. "Oh, I forgot the camera in the car," he slapped his forehead. "Charlotte, let's go back and get it." "I'll come too," Vanessa quickly said. "No, you stay with Melissa," Charlotte instructed. "We'll be right back." Melissa watched her parents hurry back down the hill. Vanessa sat on a rock, looking disgruntled, staring at her smartphone. They said they'd be right back. Melissa noticed more than 20 minutes had passed. "Vanessa, can you call Dad?" "No signal," Vanessa answered indifferently. "Besides, I need to use the bathroom." "I'm going back to the car." "Wait, let's go together." But Vanessa had already started walking. Melissa sighed and slowly followed. Her knees had begun to ache. In the desert silence, she suddenly heard the sound of an engine. Melissa stopped and listened. The sound grew louder, and she hurriedly climbed the hill. From that vantage point, her heart froze. She could see the family SUV driving away in a cloud of dust. "What are you doing?" Melissa shouted and started to descend quickly. But her pregnant body couldn't move fast enough. Filled with fear and disbelief, she pulled out her mobile phone. The "no service" display seemed to mock her. The car continued to move further away, but in the last moment, the passenger window opened, and Vanessa's face appeared. Carried on the wind, her voice reached Melissa. "Enjoy a relaxing walk." Melissa stopped, frozen with despair. "It's good exercise." Vanessa's final words faded in the wind. The car became a small dot and eventually disappeared beyond the horizon. Melissa collapsed to her knees and sat on the sand. "This must be a bad joke," she whispered in a trembling voice. "They'll come back soon." But an hour passed, then two, and no car appeared on the road. The sun grew stronger, and her water bottle was half empty. Melissa took a deep breath, trying to regain composure. "Don't panic. Think." She looked around. Even the nearest road seemed kilometers away. Walking back to civilization was too dangerous, especially in her pregnant condition. "I'll have to wait for help," she decided. "Someone will come by." But she knew how unrealistic that was in this deserted place. Still, she didn't give up hope. For the sake of her baby, and for herself. Late in the afternoon, a miracle occurred. In the distance, she saw two figures with hiking gear. Melissa gathered her remaining strength, stood up, and waved. "Help! Over here!" The young couple noticed Melissa and hurried toward her. Their faces showed surprise and concern. "Are you okay?" the woman asked. "A pregnant woman alone in a place like this. I was left behind." Melissa choked on her words, tears falling. "My family." The man acted immediately, pulling water from his backpack and handing it to Melissa. "Drink this first. Then we'll call the police." "There's no signal here." "We have a satellite phone," the man said. "We came prepared with all equipment, just in case." After hearing Melissa's story, the rescuers were furious. The man took out his phone and began filming the area around Melissa. "Let's keep this as evidence," he said quietly. "People who committed such an unforgivable act must face legal consequences." Melissa stood up with the couple's help, tears of gratitude flowing. In the rescue helicopter, Melissa had an oxygen mask attached by a paramedic. Her lips were dry from the arid air and heat, and her skin was reddened by sunburn. Through the helicopter's vibrations, she turned grateful eyes to the couple, Adam and Jessica, who had saved her. "Are you all right?" Jessica asked worriedly. "The baby?" Melissa nodded weakly. The paramedic smiled reassuringly. "The fetal heartbeat is stable. Dehydration hasn't progressed too far, but we'll get you to the hospital for examination right away." "My husband." Melissa strained to speak. "We've already contacted him," Adam said. "The police informed him as soon as we called." The helicopter landed on the rooftop of a general hospital in the Phoenix suburbs. A medical team was waiting, and Melissa was immediately transferred to a stretcher. As she was being carried into the hospital, she noticed a familiar silhouette rushing toward her from the end of the corridor. "Melissa." Greg's voice echoed. His face was contorted with fear, relief, and anger. "Greg." She held her husband's hand. "Are you okay?" "The baby?" he asked, fighting back tears. "We're examining her now," the doctor said. "Your wife has considerable heat exhaustion and dehydration, but her life is not in danger. We'll start in 4 and conduct tests immediately." Greg clung to Melissa's bedside, listening to the doctor's explanation. "The police called me. I couldn't believe it. That your parents would do such a thing. No one can believe it." Melissa looked at her husband with tired eyes. "But it's true. They left me behind." Vanessa was laughing. Before entering the examination room, two police officers approached the bed. "Mrs. Williams, we'd like to talk to you as soon as possible, but your condition." "A short interview should be fine," the doctor answered. "About 10 minutes before the examination." The female officer smiled kindly and opened her notebook. "First, let me confirm the facts. Today, you went out toward the Grand Canyon with your parents and sister, correct?" Melissa nodded weakly and explained the details. As she spoke, Greg's face gradually changed to anger. "We have this evidence," the other officer showed a video provided by Adam and Jessica. "It records the situation when you were abandoned, the car leaving, and even voices from inside the car." "We've also confirmed the license plate number," the female officer added. "We've already issued an APB. Officers have been dispatched to your parents' home as well." At that moment, the hospital room door opened, and a well-dressed woman entered with a small microphone. "Carol Simons from Channel 12 News. Melissa, regarding this tragic incident." "Get out." Greg stood up and yelled. "This is a hospital room." As the police officers escorted the reporter out, the doctor sighed. "I'm sorry. It seems news of this incident has leaked." "What do you mean?" Melissa was confused. "They probably intercepted the emergency radio," the officer explained. "News of a pregnant woman abandoned in the desert by family is a big scoop for them." During the examination, Greg waited in the hallway. He took out his cell phone and dialed a number. "Jason? It's Greg. I need your legal advice right away." "Yes, it's an emergency. Melissa's parents and sister." He lowered his voice to explain the situation. Meanwhile, media had already begun gathering outside the hospital. A pregnant woman desert abandonment case had instantly become top local news. At the Johnson mansion, Robert, Charlotte, and Vanessa were gathered in the living room. They had returned home late in the afternoon and had immediately showered, trying to return to their normal lives. "Any word from Melissa?" Robert asked, looking somewhat anxious. "Not yet," Charlotte answered while flipping through a magazine. "I'm sure Greg went to pick her up. How could she contact anyone from that place?" Vanessa laughed. "There's no cell service." "Maybe the joke went a bit too far," Robert said, looking out the window. "Dad, you're worrying too much," Vanessa said. "Melissa always finds a way, doesn't she? Besides, there are tourists nearby, someone will find her soon." "You're right," Charlotte agreed. "And she's always trying to get our attention. We just taught her a little reality check this time." "That's true," Robert finally seemed to relax. "Sometimes tough love is necessary." Vanessa lounged on the sofa and picked up the TV remote. "It's time for my favorite show." As she changed the channel, a local news program was broadcasting. For the first few seconds, the three watched the screen casually, but suddenly their expressions froze. "We repeat, a pregnant woman has been abandoned in the desert by her family on the outskirts of Phoenix," the announcer's voice resonated through the room. The screen displayed the headline, "Breaking News, Pregnant Woman Desert Abandonment Case," and showed footage of Melissa being carried on a stretcher from the rescue helicopter. "Oh my God." Charlotte's magazine slipped from her hands. Fortunately, a hiking couple discovered the victim and provided appropriate care. Currently, the victim, Melissa Williams, is undergoing examination at the hospital, and there are reports that the fetus has not been significantly affected. "They're showing it. She reported us to the police." Vanessa screamed. On the screen, a portion of the video taken by Adam and Jessica was playing. Melissa standing alone in the desert, watching the car leave. And the image of Vanessa leaning out of the car window, her voice carried by the wind. "Enjoy a relaxing walk. It's good exercise." Even more damning was that the car's license plate was clearly visible. Police are tracking the suspects and have announced they have already identified them. This cruel act is likely to face serious criminal charges. Silence fell over the room. The three stared at each other, speechless. "It was meant to be a joke," Robert said in a trembling voice. "Just a lesson for Melissa." "That's a lie." Vanessa suddenly shouted. This was all Dad and Mom's plan. I didn't. Be quiet, Vanessa, Charlotte's voice was ice cold. It was a joke. Melissa should understand that. At that moment, the doorbell rang loudly. The three were frozen, unable to move. The bell rang again, this time longer and more forcefully. Robert slowly stood up and walked to the door on shaky legs. When he opened it, 2 police officers were standing there. Are you Robert Johnson? One officer asked with a stern expression. Why yes. Are Charlotte Johnson and Vanessa Johnson also here? What is this about? We'd like all 3 of you to come to the station on charges of assault and abandonment of Melissa Williams. As Robert was about to say something, Vanessa's voice came from behind. It's all Dad and Mom's fault. They planned it. I didn't know anything. The officers looked at Vanessa with cold eyes. We'll discuss that at the station. Outside the house, red and blue police lights flashed, and neighbors began gathering out of curiosity. TV station vans had also arrived, with cameras pointed at the house. As the 3 were put into the police car, Charlotte covered her face in shame. However, Vanessa's eyes still showed a lack of genuine remorse, as if this wasn't quite real to her. It was just a little joke. She muttered quietly. I never thought it would come to this. The interrogation room at the Phoenix police station was a cold, sterile space. Robert sat alone, facing a metal table. His once dignified figure had crumbled, and he looked like an old man with slumped shoulders. Mr. Johnson, I'll ask you again, Detective Parker said calmly. Why did you abandon your pregnant daughter in the desert? It was meant to be a joke. Robert couldn't meet his eyes. To teach Melissa a lesson. A lesson? Parker's voice was dripping with doubt. What kind of lesson did your pregnant daughter need? Robert stumbled over his words, sweat beading on his forehead. She's always only thinking about herself, especially since becoming pregnant. I see, Parker took notes while speaking. So whose idea was this a joke? Robert fell silent. In another interrogation room, Charlotte was facing female Detective Morris. To be honest, this was Vanessa's idea, Charlotte said in a trembling voice. Since our daughter became pregnant, Vanessa has been harboring resentment. So you and your husband agreed to a suggestion based on your younger daughter's jealousy? Morris asked coldly. We weren't serious, Charlotte teared up. We planned to go back right away, but before that, those hikers found her. The most volatile reactions came from Vanessa in the 3rd interrogation room. Sitting in her chair, her emotions fluctuated wildly, sometimes angry, sometimes crying, sometimes even laughing. What kind of relationship did you have with your sister? Detective Richards asked. Melissa? Vanessa snorted. She's always perfect. Always meets our parents' expectations. Graduated from college, got a nice job, found a nice husband, and now even a baby. You were jealous. No. Vanessa suddenly raised her voice. She always gets all the attention. Especially since she got pregnant, our parents talk about nothing but her. How's Melissa's baby? We need to prepare Melissa's room. Her voice broke, and tears streamed down her face. I didn't mean to hurt her. I just wanted to scare her. You meant to just scare a pregnant woman by abandoning her in the scorching desert? Richards asked with an incredulous expression. I thought someone would help her right away. Vanessa cried out. Besides, Melissa always figures things out. I just wanted some time when my parents would pay attention to me. At the hospital, Melissa was resting. Tests confirmed that there were no serious effects on her or the fetus. Greg sat beside her, holding her hand. I spoke with a lawyer, Greg said quietly. With the clear evidence, charges are certain. You mean, sue my family? Melissa's voice was mixed with complex emotions. What they did is a crime, Melissa, Greg said gently but firmly. Your life and our baby's life were in danger. There was a knock on the hospital room door, and Detective Parker entered. "How are you feeling?" he asked with concern. "Much better," Melissa answered. "My family." All being questioned, Parker sat down. "Frankly, this case is very serious. Assault on a pregnant woman, abandonment. The state prosecutor is showing significant interest. The punishment. Prison time is possible, but considering their lack of prior records and family relations, a suspended sentence is more likely," Parker said carefully. "However, a restraining order will probably be issued." Melissa nodded silently. Her heart was in turmoil. Anger, sadness, and strangely, a bit of relief. A sense that the family's long distorted relationships were finally being resolved. A week after the incident, preliminary hearings began. The courtroom was packed with reporters, and the Desert pregnant woman abandonment case had gained national attention. Melissa and her husband entered with their lawyer. On the opposite side were her parents and Vanessa. Gone was their dignified appearance, all three looked exhausted and frightened. Vanessa in particular had become the target of intense social media backlash, her hair disheveled and dark circles under her eyes. As evidence, the rescuing couple's testimony and video were presented. Vanessa's voice saying, "Enjoy a relaxing walk," echoed in the courtroom, drawing gasps from the gallery. Particularly shocking were the messages found on Vanessa's smartphone during the investigation. 2 weeks before the incident, she had been proposing to her parents a plan to teach Melissa a lesson. "Looking at these messages, the premeditation is clear," Prosecutor Anderson said. "This wasn't just a joke, but a deliberate act based on jealousy and resentment." Melissa's lawyer Jason stood up. "My client was betrayed by her family and put in mortal danger. The psychological trauma she has suffered is immeasurable. However, she is still on the path to recovery. Through this trial, we ask that her safety and that of her child be the highest priority." The judge, considering the seriousness of the case, set bail for the 3 defendants and determined the trial schedule. Robert's real estate company received a flood of cancellation calls. "We don't want to do business with your company. We can't do business with someone who doesn't value family," many customers said. Charlotte's social club suspended her membership for violation of moral standards. Former friends avoided her, and all invitations were cancelled. The reaction to Vanessa was the most severe. Her social media accounts were flooded with thousands of condemning comments, and her photos were shared with tags like "worst sister" and "pregnant woman abuser." Her divorce was also exposed, and in an article where her ex-husband gave an anonymous interview, he stated, "Her self-centered personality was also a problem in our marriage." Melissa watched these events from afar while recovering at home. Greg had adjusted his work schedule to be with her as much as possible. "What do you think about what's happening to them?" Greg asked. "Honestly, I have mixed feelings," Melissa answered, looking out the window. "What they did is unforgivable. But they're still my family. Especially my parents. But they put you and our baby in danger." "I know," Melissa placed her hand on her belly. "That's why, for this child, I need to be strong. Not bound by past family relationships, but to protect our new family." That night, Melissa told Greg of another decision. "I'll continue with the legal charges," she said resolutely. "But not for revenge. It's to protect this child and to prevent someone else from going through the same thing. Especially since the social punishment Vanessa is receiving is more than enough." Greg hugged his wife. "You really are strong." "I have to be," Melissa smiled softly. "For this child." 1.5 years passed. "Emma, come to Mama," Melissa opened her arms on the lawn in the garden. The toddler girl walked toward her with a smile. Greg sat on a garden chair, gently watching his wife and daughter. "She's strong like you," he smiled. "Yes. But her gentle heart comes from you." Melissa lifted Emma and kissed her soft cheek. Life in their new home was peaceful. After the incident, they had left Phoenix and moved to another town in Arizona. For a new beginning. Melissa worked at an accounting firm just 3 days a week, spending the rest with Emma. It was a balanced life. "You're meeting Kate today, right?" Greg said. Kate was Melissa's therapist. Since the incident, she had been seeing her regularly to heal her emotional wounds. "Yes. She's been very helpful," Melissa smiled. "Especially lately, when I think of them, I don't feel as much pain as before." It had taken a long time to overcome the trauma. "Robert, the contract is ready." Charlotte entered a small office. Her husband sat at an old desk, looking at documents with a tired expression. Their once vast real estate company had shrunk to this small office. Most of their high-end clients had left, and those who remained were either unaware of the rumors due to business relationships or simply didn't care. "Thank you," Robert nodded slightly. His hair had turned completely white, and his back was hunched. Charlotte had changed too. The former queen of social circles now wore plain clothes with minimal makeup. Her friends had abandoned her, and making new friends was difficult. Their names were infamous locally, and Googling them still brought up articles about the desert pregnant woman abandonment case at the top of the results. "Any word from Vanessa?" Robert asked. "Just the weekly phone call," Charlotte sighed. "She says she still can't leave her apartment." Vanessa's situation was the most miserable. Unable to recover from the trauma of social backlash, she had fallen into depression. Finding employment was difficult, and she lived solely on financial support from her parents. She feared going outside and relied on delivery services for daily living. She had received several interview requests from media but declined them all. The trial results were as many had expected. Vanessa received a suspended sentence, and her parents were ordered to pay substantial damages. A restraining order against all three was issued, preventing them from approaching Melissa and her family. "Melissa's daughter is 10 months old now, isn't she?" Charlotte asked quietly. "Have you ever seen a picture?" "No," Robert shook his head sadly. "We don't have the right to see our granddaughter's face." Melissa was shopping at the supermarket, pushing a cart through the vegetable aisle. Emma sat in the child's seat of the cart, playing with her mother's hair with her small hands. "Do you like broccoli?" Melissa asked, and Emma responded with a smile. As she turned into the next aisle, she locked eyes with a familiar figure. It was Vanessa. Thin, pale, and with all her former glamour completely gone. For a moment, they both stood frozen. Vanessa's eyes moved to Emma, and tears welled up. "Melissa," she said in a trembling voice. "Vanessa," Melissa replied calmly. After a long silence, she added, "How are you?" "I am." Vanessa stumbled over her words. "Is she your daughter?" Melissa nodded. "Emma." Vanessa wiped her eyes with a shaking hand. "She looks like you." "Yes." Melissa, Not now," Melissa said quietly. "I'm taking Emma away." She turned the cart around and headed to another aisle. In her heart, for the first time, she felt pity rather than anger toward her sister. That night, when she told Greg about the encounter, he asked worriedly, "Were you okay?" "Yes," Melissa answered, looking at the starry sky outside the window. "Strangely, I was able to remain calm." "She's broken. Can you forgive her?" "It's not about forgiveness," Melissa gazed at her daughter's bedroom. "I'm moving forward." They remain prisoners of the past. That might be their greatest punishment. She took a deep breath. "I have a loving husband and daughter. I've found a real family. Something they couldn't take away from me." Outside the window, stars shone in the new moon night sky. The beginning of a new lunar cycle. Melissa's life, too, had begun a new cycle. She had grown stronger from past pain and learned to love family in the true sense. And far away, her parents and Vanessa spent their days in regret, thinking of what they had forever lost through their cruel actions.